We have several committee members physically present to make our quorum, and the rest are joining us virtually. I'll ask that all committee members attending in person to please speak clearly so those joining us virtually can hear you. We are all wearing masks, and we'll need to make an extra effort to ensure good audio quality. Committee members joining us online will participate in the discussion and vote on action items as well. We ask that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking and use the raise hand feature on your Zoom toolbar. The public will also be able to participate virtually in this meeting. There are 2 public comment points in this meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. If attending by phone, you can hit the *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you are called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email before the meeting. I was going to have a couple of comments to you today about the stimulus package, but looking around the room and having a whole team from DOT, I decided to skip that and not be intimidated. But along the stimulus funding, however, was a point of inspiration for what I'm going to say in a minute. And that is, I was having a discussion with some of my colleagues, some of which are in the room, about sort of their disappointment that they may or may not get some stimulus package money. And that kind of got me thinking to, what are we doing here? What is the Technical Advisory Committee doing? What is the TISMO? What is the TISMO Advisory Committee? I'm sorry. What is the TISMO Committee function as well? So thinking back, I felt like we really have an obligation to ourselves and to the Metro Plan Board to be able to speak our minds. A lot of us here may have gotten used to systematically, saying I. You hardly ever hear somebody that opposes something, and I'm not saying that's bad. I think it's probably great that we all have consensus. Having said that, however, I think it is important to speak your mind honestly. I think a lot of us might reserve comments because they may not want to offend somebody in the room. And I think it is important to kind of stress the point that we all are here for a reason. We're vested in this committee. You're vested in two forms. One, to your the people that you represent, your entity that you're representing, and you're always, most importantly, you're vested to say your mind, because it may not affect your region directly, what you're voting on. However, ultimately, your vote will affect somebody else, and I think you should be honest, and I'm sure you all are, but sometimes we, like I said, we tend to shy away from saying our minds in fear of or concern for our colleagues. So I just want to say that again, that honesty builds trust, and we all have a lot of trust in each other, and I see us around the room going back and forth and discussing things and opening up about our issues, and I think that's great shop talk, but you always have to keep in the back of your mind, in my humble opinion, that you owe it to the group, if you did not like something, to speak your mind. And ultimately, your decision, believe it or not, may affect the decision of the Metro Plan Board, because they take your expertise or our expertise in effect when they make the ultimate decision to approve or disapprove a project. And there's a lot of money involved in our decisions, and you'll see that in the discussion from DOT today. Having said that, I will turn to Mr. Keith Caskey for agenda review right now. Mr. Caskey.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members and all attending both in the room and online. Again, we appreciate your patience and understanding as we try to conduct our committee meeting safely. And we plan to continue conducting TAC member meetings in this format through the end of the year. So of course, that's just one more meeting. As a reminder, when we use this format, we need to have a quorum of 20 members in the room, just as we do at in-person meetings, which we discussed earlier. And the crucial difference is that with a minimum quorum in the room, we can conduct votes in which all members can participate, and those members online are counted as present. So this makes it very important to RSVP for meetings, so we know if we are in danger of not having a quorum and can prepare for that, possibly by contacting members one-on-one to make sure we can get the right number of people here for the meeting. And there will still be a Zoom option available for the public, and we encourage members of the public to remain virtual as they observe the meeting and make public comments. When we meet in person, we are observing current CDC guidelines, and we ask all members to wear masks during the meeting, and we'll ask that everyone be considerate of each other. And please let me or any of us know if you have any concerns on that. I have a few announcements. First of all, I wanted to mention that the Blind Experience event is being held as part of Mobility Week. And this will be at Orlando City Hall on Wednesday, November 3rd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we can provide additional information for those who would like to attend that. And an RSVP is required to attend that event. Also, I wanted to mention that the Florida Automated Vehicle Summit will be held from November 29th to December 1st. And on the agenda, it says it'll be at the CFX office. That's actually incorrect. It'll be at the Rosen Shingle Creek Hotel. So don't show up at the CFX office for that. But there is a link with more information on that on your agenda. And then we have a change to the order of the presentations that was made after the agendas had already been sent out. The presentation on the I-4 Ultimate project has been moved up from 5D to 5B. And then the other two FDOT presentations on the stimulus projects and the I-4 BTU will move down to C and D. And those two projects, or those two presentations, are tied in with the MTP and TIP amendments that are coming up later on the agenda. Also, we had a couple of casting changes. Jack Atkins will be giving the presentations on the stimulus projects along with Catalina. And then Nick Lepp will be presenting the MTP amendments request rather than Alex Trauger. So with that, we'd like to take attendance, and I'll call on Ms. Lisa Smith to call the roll.
Good morning. I'll ask all committee members online to please unmute yourselves now for the roll call. While those in the room, please keep your microphones off until called. Online participants, please make sure your video is on if possible so that we can confirm it's you. You'll find the unmute and video buttons on your Zoom screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Abed Dantuano.
Here.
Blackadar.
Here.
Cash.
Present.
Castro.
Here.
Clem. Cornelison.
Ma'am, it's John Hanley. I'm here for Ash.
Okay. DeVries.
Here.
El Hassar.
Present.
Fadlbab. Gold.
Here.
Friel. Hardwick.
Here.
Hawthorne.
Present.
Hitt.
Here.
Dredge.
Here.
Kane.
Present.
Kessel.
Here.
King. Krug.
Here.
Moskowitz.
Here.
Muhisen.
Present.
Maherky.
Here.
Allure.
Here.
Pulliam.
Here.
Radzai. Ramos.
Here.
Sanders.
Here.
Schmidt. Sonorans. Stirk.
Here.
Walter.
Here.
Wharton,
Here.
Witten,
Here.
Williams. Chairman Heisen, we do have an in-person quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. We have 4 presentations today. Participants online, please use the raise hand feature to be recognized if you want to ask a question. You may also raise your hand during the presentation, but we will hold questions until the presentation has ended. Participants in the room, please use your raise hand feature as well to ask a question, and you will be recognized at the end of the presentation. Our first presentation today will be on the preview of the 2022 legislative priorities. It's going to be presented by Ms. Virginia Whittington. Ms. Virginia, you have the floor.
And those of you who are joining online, at your places in your table, you should be able to pull up a copy of the legislative priorities that are being proposed to the Metro Plan Orlando Board for the upcoming legislative session. I can tell you these are pretty much hot off the press. We have been having one-on-one meetings with our executive committee on the way to the board for their adoption at their next meeting. Those of you who are joining online, there should be a link inside of the chat where you're able to access a copy of the proposed priorities as well. And Ms. Leilani, who's working in the background, may be able to share her screen for those of you who are not able to access them right away. Those of you who've been here for a while know that each year Metro Plan Orlando adopts a set of legislative priorities that gives our legislative team in Tallahassee direction to work with our legislators to continue to advance those programs and opportunities for transportation. We have been advised by our team in Tallahassee that it is likely that this will be this is the word that I have been using, a vanilla year when it comes to transportation, because there are 2 really big items that's going to take precedent and much of the attention and focus. And that is redistricting and elections. And then you throw in that budget thing and transportation kind of goes down on the totem pole. So what we have done is we've devised a set of priorities that we will be presenting to the Metro Plan Orlando Board that restates our positions and sends a signal that this is what is important to the Central Florida region. The top priorities, what is missing from this list that was here last year was for us to seek transport funding to expand the Best Foot Forward for Pedestrian Safety program in Central Florida. We patted ourselves on the back because we did a good job. We got $100,000 appropriation request through the House, through the Senate, with the help of Representative Kristen Arrington and Senator Linda Stewart. The passed House, passed Senate, got into the budget, got to the governor's desk, and that veto pen, it did not survive. So that $100,000 appropriation was removed from the budget. And with that came a restriction that FDOT was not allowed for 1 year to provide funding to that program. So we don't want to take that risk again, because although it was vetoed, something good came out of it. And that was a commitment from FDOT and the new safety administrator and the new Office of Safety that has been established, that we would seek opportunities locally to expand this program. So you will not see an effort for us to seek another appropriation. So that's been peeled off. Our commitment to safety has not diminished. You all know that safety is first here at Metro Plan Orlando. So we instead will be letting the legislature know that increased funding for transportation that does not negatively impact the State Transportation Trust Fund or the work program is of importance. And what do we mean by that? We mean that we welcome additional funding in those programs or in the State Transportation Fund, but we don't want it to negatively impact the Transportation Trust Fund or the work program, in that new money comes in, but money that's already been there gets put someplace else. So we're wanting to make sure that that is presented as our position. Also, the Transportation Disadvantaged Fund and program is suffering. If you went to the links, Audit and Finance Committee on yesterday, you would have heard how they are trying very, very hard to meet the needs of the transportation disadvantaged. And this is not just here, but around the state. There's a driver shortage. One of the reasons that there's a driver shortage is because packages don't talk back, and they can drive for $19 an hour for Amazon. And you got people over here and we're paying $13 an hour. So they're doing some things to try and increase and meet those needs, but this is not going to get any better unless there's additional funding to be able to pay these people a wage that is market consistent with the market. And then lastly, the top priorities is the priority to continue the endeavor to get the bicyclists included in the vulnerable road user category in that move over law. So that's been there for a while. We will continue again to pursue that. The next set of priorities that you see, the legislation that we would support, are all rollovers, if you will. You've seen these before. They are consistent with what is being advanced by the MPOAC, the Metropolitan Organization Advisory Council out of Tallahassee. And we're essentially saying, untie our hands, allow us to use the tools that are already in our toolkit in a way that is that works for us locally and regionally. And also that last bullet there, that does not reduce local option transportation revenue sources. The last two here are two that you've seen before, and that the board has, at least the executive committee has agreed to continue to advance, is any advancement of innovative transportation mobility solutions or policies that continue to make us leaders in the area of autonomous, connected, shared vehicles. We've been doing a good job with that, and we want to be able to keep that up. And then the last provision there that allows us to do what we're doing now in terms of having board meetings, public meetings in a virtual setting in the case of declared states of emergencies. Our hands were tied for a bit early on, but we were able to get some authorization or some relaxation in that Florida Sunshine Law that will allow us to have our public meetings and continue the discourse. We will continue to monitor legislation. These next 4 items are items that may or may not come back, but the Metro Plan Orlando Board had taken positions on previously. We're keeping them on the list, as when they do come back, the Metro Plan Board will note their position, whether they support or oppose the legislation attempts if they come back. Those 4 that are there out in parens, you see the previous position, just reminding the board of the position that they had taken in the last legislative session. That may or may not change. And our executive committee last year felt pretty strongly about bringing those back each year to ensure that they reaffirm their commitment. And then lastly, we have a couple of agency action items that we are working staff to staff, department to department to try and resolve, instead of asking the legislature to get involved in these. They have not risen to that level yet, though that first one is on the MPOAC list. We would like to try and resolve it around the conference table instead of taking it into the legislative chambers. And that is concerns where state funding that comes from the federal government to metropolitan planning organizations, when it gets to the state, they color it state funds instead of it being called federal funds, and they come with those state restrictions. And so we're looking for a way to work cooperatively to resolve that. And then to work cooperatively with DOT to integrate projects into the region that are using those stimulus funds. We're doing that. You're going to hear a little bit more about that in just a moment. And the board action that we're requesting is that they adopt the 2022 legislative positions and authorize the executive committee to act and respond to items that may crop up in between board meetings. And so that is a quick overview of what we're advancing. This has been previewed with members of the executive committee. It will be presented at the board meeting when they come together November 10th. And if there are any questions.
Any question from Ms. Whittington? Our first,
Yes, I have a question.
we'll first recognize the participant virtually. Do we have any virtual participants that have a question?
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Thank you, Kathy. I will now go to the participants in the room. I heard a voice.
Hey, sorry.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, my question is, under the mid-block crosswalks, you did not list a position previously taken. Can you explain?
Yes, thank you for raising that. They took no position on that in the previous, when that came forward. The position of the Metro Plan Orlando Board at that time was to just kind of wait and see what happens. So they did not take a position.
So if that comes back, will the board have the opportunity to take a position on that, depending on what that is?
Yes, and with the process that we're putting in place, as we did last year, we will bring the executive committee together and run it by them, and they make, because we can get them a lot faster than we can get the entire board. So yes, they will be able to weigh in on it.
Great.
We're hoping it doesn't come back.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for Ms. Whittington?
Right,
Hearing
thank
none,
you.
hearing none, thank you very much for your presentation,
Chairman.
very informative. Our next presentation is going to be by,
Mr. Nabil, I'm so sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, go
My
ahead.
button was delayed.
Please
I just
proceed.
have a quick question. Could you remind us what the restrictions are with the funding that comes from the federal government, that when it's colored as state funding, what are the types of things that if that was eliminated?
It
would
is
be-
how the funds are being used. There was some question about whether funding could be used for things like paper towels. And it could, if it's used from the federal sources, because it comes to the locals and it's essentially doing those things that are needed at a local level. But the state had deemed that they were state funds. So we're just trying to work through that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Whittington. Our next presentation is going to be on the I-4 Ultimate Projects. It will be presented by Mr. Jeremy Dillmore from FDOT. Mr. Dillmore.
Thank you, members, for giving me an opportunity to come to share this message with you this morning. I'll go ahead and jump into it. So we're here to talk about the I-4 Ultimate project. As all of you, I'm sure know, the I-4 Ultimate is the 21 miles that stretches between Orange and Seminole County. We've had a little construction project going on for the past few years, and we're getting to a point of wrapping it up. To remind you, this does go through and add 4 express lanes, 2 in each direction, to the existing lanes that were already present. There's a reconstruction of 15 major interchanges. We've seen that work already having been complete for the most part. It includes quite a few safety enhancements. It gives us our full shoulders, making some of our emergency response to be a little bit more consistent, for us to be able to have areas for our vehicles to be able to pull off. It also goes ahead and corrects some horizontal and vertical geometry, making it so that our stopping sight distance is what we would like to see it be, so that we can go ahead and, as we know how fast folks drive on I-4, to be able to stop in time before rearing a vehicle in front of them. So with that, here's the typical section, as you're no doubt seen on your ride in here today, if you're with us in person, where we see that there's a barrier separation for those lanes, and we have our general use lanes outside of it. When we start looking at some of the things that have already taken place, back in December of 2020, we hit a major milestone. It was great to see us be able to open up the general use lanes, to be able to see this actually had a great improvement on the corridor itself. It went ahead and reduced the congestion in a lot of areas, seeing the benefit of some of those reconfigured interchanges. And when we started looking at up to the future, we still had to certainly complete the express lanes in the middle, but there's also a number of other remaining work items We had to get in there and work with some additional pavement marking. We had to go ahead and look at some landscaping and aesthetics. There's still some punch list items. And we're going to continue working on those. We're going to get as mentioned, the express lane opening is coming up here soon. And what we expect is reaching into the spring that we'll go ahead and be able to work through a bunch of those punch list items, some of the landscaping work in order to go ahead and get us to a final complete state. When we look at the construction so far, we are over 90% of the way done. Again, there's still those punch list items that are happening. We also have a number of our toll gantries. You see one there in the picture that are completed. And when we say completed, it's not just the gantry over the top, but the equipment in place there, making sure that that talks back to the Turnpike back office to be able to exchange information effectively. And what we'll be doing is trying to then integrate that with the pricing system. So that's what's going to be going on through the end of this year. When we look at if that work being completed in late 2021, and there's quite a bit to happen there in order to make sure all the systems talk accordingly, we'll be able to then open it up to traffic in early 2022. So when we start looking at when it is open, what are you going to see? You're starting to see these signs. They have some test messages on them right now on the corridor as you drive through. But what you'll see is there's signs, and these signs are critically important because what they're telling us is when you look at the destination that's there, about the amount that you'll need to pay in order to use the express lanes to go ahead and get to those destinations. Now, why would someone use the express lanes? By going ahead and pricing these lanes, we're trying to control the use of them. And then with folks using those, we're going to provide them a more reliable trip. That's going to also then pull vehicles out of the general use lanes and actually improve the service on those general use lanes. When we price those lanes, it's going to be solely based upon the traffic that's utilizing the express lanes. So when we go ahead and look at the volume of vehicles that are in there, that'll help us to go ahead and set the price at the right level so that when there's more cars trying to use it, that we increase the price so that we don't end up having too many people using those lanes to where we just are going to have congestion in those lanes as well. When we look at how we go ahead and share that information with the public, what we're not doing is relying upon one sign. We have a whole series of signs to go ahead and communicate critical information to the motorists. So what we want to let folks know is where those entrances are. We want to give them the advance warning similar to what we do with interchanges right now. We also are going ahead and providing them twice the amount that it would cost to go ahead and reach a destination. One key thing to note is when you see a price on a single sign to one of those destinations, don't add the prices together. To go to that destination is the price you see on the sign. When you go to a new sign, the price you see is the additional price to get to that destination. So when you're adding, don't add on a single sign, you add across multiple signs. Hopefully that makes sense. When we start looking at how these are going to be charged, there's not going to be toll booths. This isn't where you're going to stop and go ahead and end up paying someone with cash. In order to keep those lanes free flowing, they're what's referred to as all electronic tolling. When we look at what kind of transponders are accepted, you'll see that there's a variety of different transponders that have been integrated into the system. That includes both SunPass as well as ePass. And you see some from folks that are out of state as well. There will be no cash option, and it will not be a toll by plate option. So you'll need a transponder in order to be able to use the lanes. There'll be an outreach plan, and I know this says fall of 2021. One thing that's really key is in the department, there's only 3 seasons because winter becomes very, very confusing. Not only does it not get very cold here in Florida, but the other thing is it spans between 2 different years. Is the winter, is that the end of the year, is at the beginning of the year, right? So when we start looking at this, what we're going to be doing is as we get closer to opening those lanes, which will be in December, more than likely, we'll begin a public outreach effort to be able to share information to the general public about how to use these express lanes effectively so that so we minimize confusion and that folks understand the options that they now have available to them for their trip into work or back to home. That's put onto our website. There will also be some videos that we go ahead and stand up. Additionally, we'll be going ahead and working with community partners to go ahead and have pamphlets, information that's gone ahead and put into convenient areas for those that frequent the corridor, including our tourists. When we look at incidents, one of the things that's key here, I think you've heard it mentioned before, is safety always comes first. We've been working with our first responders to make sure that we have a way in which we can get them into the express lanes if there was a crash that happened to take place. That's where you see these sliding gates. That's the picture you see on the bottom. That can actually open up and to provide access into those express lanes to trying to speed the response. We've also been coordinating with FHP, with law enforcement, with EMS, with fire, as part of a coordinated effort to respond to crashes like we normally do on the TSM&O side. There are dedicated road rangers for the facility. Those are provided by the concessionaire to be able to assist motorists in emergency, including setting up initial MOT to go ahead and respond to the crashes that are there, to provide a response if someone just needs a change of a flat tire or some other kind of minor assist in order to get them back on their way. With that, I'm not John Tyler, I'm Jeremy Delmore. I'm the TSM&O engineer for District 5. But if you would like to have any kind of follow-up information, you can feel free to reach out to myself or to John in order to go ahead and get more information on I-4 Ultimate and next steps. We'll certainly open it up for any questions if that's.
Anybody has any questions for Mr. Dillmore? And we'll start by asking the people online if they have any questions. Please raise
Mr.
your
Chairman,
hand.
there are no hands raised online.
Okay, anyone in the room that has any questions for Mr. Dillmore?
Yeah, I've got a question. How do the access gates work? Are they manual or is that electronically operated?
So both. So there's actually, I think at this point, 5 different ways in which they're activated. So there is a keypad in which you can put in where one of the first responders will be given the codes for in order to be able to punch it in the top. And that will actually activate the gates open, the 42-foot opening for them to be able to traverse their vehicle through. Alternatively, we will be able to access that from the traffic management center. So we can actually remotely control it. There are 2 systems that are able to receive signals. One of them is a click to enter system, which is common, I believe, within Orange County for their first responders to be able to activate them. There's also the one that's more conventional it's a squelch-based system in order to be able to activate them as well. Then there is the if all else fails option, where there's actually a crank. There's a little gate that's on top of the base unit where you can go in there and pull a crank out, and then you can sit there and manually crank this open. Obviously, that's not what we'd like to have happen, but it is a fail-safe that is present in the system in order to ensure that if a first responder is there always is a way for them to get through the gate.
Any other questions for Mr. Dillmore?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question.
You recognize.
For the variable tolls, is there like a maximum allowed toll or is that totally up to the concessionaire?
So the concessionaire is not actually setting the amounts. The amounts are actually run from the RTMC.
Okay.
So we would go ahead and work through our internal processes within the department to go ahead and look at the pricing that achieves a traffic maximizing function. So I should have probably covered that. That's something that's pretty important. We wanted to make sure the department had control over the pricing and not the concessionaire. And the reason for that is because we want to look at what the values are of our region, right? We want to be able to see that we're maximizing the movement of people, that we're improving traffic flow more than anything else. It's not about trying to derive revenue, it's about moving people. So when we look at it, we're taking measurements from the system, and then we're going in there and setting up a pricing regime in order to try to move the maximum number of folks. And in doing so, there are adjustments that we do need to make within the software in order to try to get that balance right. But what we're always trying to do is to price it just high enough in order to get the maximum throughput throughout the corridor.
So based on that, I guess it's by software, like you say, so does it just up and down, like all throughout the day, like you can, or is it for 3 hours or 2 hours, how is that pricing structure done?
So there's some judgment that goes into how it's tuned. The system is able to fluctuate the price on like a 15-minute basis at its maximum frequency. It doesn't go any more frequent than that. The other thing to note is that when the price changes and that it always works in favor of the motorist. So if the price is going up and you passed a sign and you saw a dollar amount and then you were traversing into the corridor and the price went up, you pay the price that you saw or less. If the price drops after you pass that sign, the amount you pay will actually go down. So when we start looking at it, we make the changes in the system in such a way that you always pay what's on the sign or less. In terms of its speed of fluctuation, again, that's something that as we go through and start operating the facility, we're going to have to see how people are responding. There's always, when these open up across the US, there's changes in the types of behaviors based upon locales. And you have to work with it, see what the response is, see how the public's kind of accepting it in order to look and see what kind of changes make it so you have that steady flow of traffic for the corridor. So there's going to be a little bit of changes that are going to happen over time, Tawny, as we basically work into the system. It'll be less changes at first, and they'll become more frequent as we go further into the project.
So you have dedicated operators then, or will have dedicated operators for just that I-4 that's going to sort of monitor that traffic and then setting the tolls accordingly?
So what we don't have is a person going in there and counting cars. This is all done through electronic means, but we have a person that's always verifying what the software is saying to see if it makes sense, right? We always have the human in the loop to make sure that things make sense. When we have those are dedicated operators. So there's actually 2 of them that are dedicated for the facility and 1 supervisor to make sure that we have the appropriate pricing that's being shown on the signs. Those are in addition to the operators that we have that are there to look at informing the public through our advanced traveler information system, through FL 511, through our normal means, which including the back office connections that we have to some of the apps you probably have on your cell phone. And then we also have operators that are there to specifically look at crashes and to work with first responders to make sure those get cleaned up quickly. So they are augmented staff. We went through and have just awarded a staffing contract to the Regional Traffic Management Center in order to get new staff in there. And that contract will actually start up the 1st of next month.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Okay.
Sure.
Brad?
Thank you, Jeremy. Just a question, is it going to be integrated with your apps like Waze, Google Maps? On this, when I was in Miami, it was not a few years ago.
So when you look at that integration, that's a 2-way street, right? Will we very much like to be able to share more information with those platforms? Absolutely. Are those platforms ready to receive that information? Not necessarily. Now, what we've been doing, Brett, is we actually have a dedicated person at the TMC that goes in as a super user in Waze and does this through the old-fashioned integration, right? We put it directly into their system as much as we can. And amazingly, we tend to get the stuff really, really quickly and really, really accurately. So that's increased our Waze rating, the way that they rate individual users in their software. So amazingly, our operator has done pretty well. It seemed to be actually pretty knowledgeable about traffic around the Central Florida area. So they put a lot of weight to the opinion that we have about what's going on with traffic flow. But it's no greater access than what you have if you were to sign up as a user and start putting things in manually. Unfortunately, that's the best means that we have. Anything that's at our disposal, we're going to use in order to try to get traffic information out there. But that's the limitation, is that the platform just isn't built for that yet.
Ms. Walter, you recognize?
Thank you, Jeremy. A quick question. You said there's no toll by plate and that it's transponder only. So is there going to be an enforcement aspect if people enter the lanes without a transponder?
So there are 2 things to note, is that because enforcement comes in multiple flavors, right? The department, we don't go through and issue citations. Like, we don't issue movement, we don't issue tickets effectively. So that's really an FHP side of things, and we do partner with them. If it looks like things are really getting to a point where it doesn't make sense. There's also within when you enter into lanes, there's a warning sign that goes ahead and talks about if someone is considered a violator, about an additional charge for a trip. And there are signs that will be shown that go ahead and talk about what the additional charge would be for folks that do not use the lanes correctly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any others? Mr. Dillmore, I have a quick question. What is the rationale behind physically separating those express lanes rather than just pavement markings?
Yes, so when you look at them, both of them are certainly acceptable ways in which to go ahead and separate lanes in a facility. If you look at that within the Florida design manual, the FDM, that goes ahead and gives us the option to do either. When you look at it, there's pros and cons to each one of them. When you look at what happens when you have a barrier separation, is that you get more separation between the lanes. They run as more independent facilities. You go ahead and don't have where drivers would take a very unsafe maneuver, which we highly discourage, but we have seen happen in Miami where people dive across the lanes. So it makes incident management in some ways safer with the barrier separation. On the other hand, what you do is it also makes it so your response time gets a little bit longer because what you run into there is the access to get to the crash is harder because you have to find the right access point through the barrier. So there's pluses and minuses to each one of the different types of situations that are out there. When we were going through and looking at this facility, well, and I should also mention one of the big ones, of course, is right-of-way, it's space. So going ahead and having enough of a typical section that's large enough, when you have a barrier, you end up with shoulders on both sides, as opposed to a buffer, it's much smaller. So you have to look at the specifics of the corridor and look at what the trade-offs are. When we went through and looked at this particular section of roadway, there weren't necessarily those options in place. What was being discussed was basically barrier was kind of the constant. This was before 95 Express had come about. So when we built our facility, when we acquired the right-of-way, when we designed the project, everything was about barrier separation. And what you'll see is as we expand beyond I-4 Ultimate, we go into beyond the Ultimate, we're exploring those alternative typicals using the flexibility that we've got now in the FDM to try to balance those variables more correctly. So there's no one option that is better than another. It was what was the state of the practice back when we went ahead and were making the choices for that project.
That's good analysis, but was there any formal, pros and cons analysis comparing no barrier versus barrier?
There was one that was done. There was actually a pretty big push right before we went through and released the concession agreement. And we went through and took a look at the analysis. It was heavily driven by the fact that we had already acquired the right of way. So when we already gone ahead and paid the expense for the additional width, there was, what is the cost savings associated with going to a buffer separation? And then how does that affect operations and the long-term costs of operations, as well as what are the potential safety impacts? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good studies that compares the safety head-to-head between one and the other. So we had to take some liberties in trying to look at some qualitative adjustments instead of quantitative ones, but there was an analysis that was done.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Gilmore. Our next presentation is going to be what you've been waiting for, federal stimulus projects coming to our region by Mr. Jack Atkins of FDOT. Mr. Atkins, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Happy to be here this morning to present to you. I'm Jack Atkins. I'm the Interim Director of Transportation Development in the district. And I think we've all been anxious about this day and getting stimulus coming. It's been a while, and we're looking forward to getting these projects rolling out and helping our community and being able to get these things moving forward. As you know, these projects are part of a big infusion of funding into our budget to make these transportation improvements to our area and to our facilities. And obviously working with partners like you all is the key to the success, and it's the key to success for our regional transportation system. The department's committed to close collaboration with our partner agencies, and we want to continue to strategize for the most efficient ways to meet those needs. The projects being advanced help to push forward the department's vision of enhanced mobility, safety, and to better connect our communities and align with upcoming projects in our work program cycle. And I think you're going to see as the dollars move forward and we're able to work with our work program folks that most of these projects were in our 5-year plan, and that's going to free up some money create some ripple effects to be able to move forward other projects that maybe have been in the latter years. So we're hoping to advance some projects further too. The projects being advanced are high value projects, and the focus on these is selected for advancement is they needed to be construction ready. We wanted to get things out there and ready to go, and we wanted to deliver these projects in an expedited manner. The projects selected closely align with existing tentative 5-year work program, like I said, and hopefully it's going to create some ripple effects to get going. And right now we're in the middle of our work program, and I believe Monday we start with our online public meetings, and then the 28th will be in person at the district office. So we are moving forward with all that. And just kind of quickly take a look at what we have. And that gives you an overall view of where we were in the district with some of our major projects. And the focus in Metro Plan obviously is going to be the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate, the south end, and I-4 Beyond the Ultimate in the north side. And then to further give you details on what we plan to do is Catalina Chacon, and Catalina has been working with this for several years, and she can present the nuts and bolts on each of these things. Catalina?
Thank you, Jack. Good morning, everyone. My name is Catalina Chacon, and I work with the Florida Department of Transportation. So this is just a quick overview, and then I'm going to go into a more detailed presentation. So the improvements with the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate in the South counties include a westbound express lane from I-4 Ultimate to west of State Road 536. And then the cost is $50 million. Then we are looking at ramp widening at the State Road 528 interchange. The cost is $12.4 million. And then interchange improvements at the I-4 and State Road 535 interchange, and the cost is $53.2 million. Looking at the north, we have two projects that came through the stimulus funding. First one is the I-4 at US 1792 interchange improvements with a cost for construction of $3 million. And then the 46A interchange at I-4, specifically the Reinhardt Road at 46A intersection improvements. The cost is $5.4 million. So now I'm gonna go over more in depth on the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects. Right. Oh, sorry. There we go. So we're gonna go over a brief overview of the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate. Then I'm gonna talk about this express lane extension that we also call the tube. And then I'm gonna briefly talk about the interchange improvements at Sand Lake Road, Daryl Carter, and 535. So back in July, we came and we presented and provided an update on the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate and what we're doing at the district. And we wanna continue to modernize I-4 beyond the I-4 Ultimate. So we wanna look at the north or east or south or west, and we wanna be able to meet growing demands and try to identify critical areas that we can advance sooner rather than later, and especially with the stimulus funding discussion that was going on. Some of the opportunities or those new tools that we have, which Jeremy kind of touched base a little bit on his presentation just now, include, well, how do we add the capacity that we need to I-4? So we have updated policies when it comes to that. We have the FDOT managed lanes policy versus the express lane policy to add the capacity that we need. There's more lessons learned or more guidance when it comes to direct connects to and from the express lanes, as well as how we enter or exit the express lanes. We also have new parameters, like Jeremy mentioned, when it comes to how we separate the express lanes from the general use lanes. And then finally, lessons learned in industry feedback. We want to see if we can reduce the size of the projects to be able to move them to construction sooner rather than later. And we've been analyzing all this time at the department with the team, and our evaluation approach remains the same as when we came back in July. We want to make sure that we maintain the purpose at need from the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate Project Development and Environment or PD&E study. We want to stay within the right-of-way that was defined for that study, provide similar traffic operations, identify cost savings opportunities, and engage our stakeholders in this evaluation. So through this evaluation, these are the projects that are identified that came from our evaluation. And through our analysis, one of the things that stood out the most was that we were forecasting a future bottleneck where the I-4 Ultimate Express lanes end in the westbound direction, of I-4. And we needed to look into it to see what we could do. How do we provide the additional capacity that is needed to address that future bottleneck? So we've been analyzing with the team and vetting the concepts. Some of our ideas included utilizing the existing shoulder in the westbound direction, the inside shoulder, during peak hours, also known as part-time shoulder use. But this option would require significant support from local and law enforcement to make sure that it was a safe operation. Another option would have been to construct the mega project. Unfortunately, that cost for that mega project is about $1 billion. So even with stimulus funding, it's a big number. So in the end, we arrive at a solution that's going to address those needs, those capacity needs. And it's extending a westbound express lane, single westbound buffer separated express lane from where I-4 Ultimate ends, basically all the way through west of 536. And we call it the tube, and I'll explain why in the next slide. But this tube, it's a good balance of all of our options. So we basically are widening to the inside of I-4 and the westbound. So kind of utilizing that shoulder. And then it also is considers the cost for this type of project. So now I'm gonna walk through the tube. And as I mentioned, we identified this bottleneck, which is where the I-4 Ultimate Express lanes end in the westbound direction. It is shown here on the screen with the orange arrow. And what happened is during this evaluation, we realized that about half of the traffic that's traveling westbound in the I-4 Express lanes, they want to continue going west, and they don't want to use those interchanges that are in between. So what the tube does is that it provides that opportunity for those vehicles to continue going west towards Tampa. And we, in addition, the tube will also improve safety and operations at the end of the I-4 Ultimate Express lanes. It will better accommodate future population increases as well as economic growth. And we call it the tube because once you're in the tube, the last exit point is the orange arrow, or where I-4 Ultimate ends. And then once you're in there, it provides that reliable traffic to continue going west. And you stay in the tube all the way where it ends, which is west of Stereo 536. The tube is considered an interim improvement as it will support the traffic projected for the next 10 years. We will be able to use the tube in future projects, as we could use that payment that's there for future MOT facing or maintenance of traffic facing while we identified future projects for I-4. So this is a typical section that shows the tube. And as you can see here, we are widening to the inside of I-4 in the westbound direction. And we will separate the tube from the general use lanes with a buffer and those tubular markers that Jeremy was referring to is one of those new tools that it's available to us to separate the express lanes. Now I'm gonna go over how we plan to implement and construct the tube, as well as how we will deliver the other projects that we identified through our evaluation. So one of the things that we realized was the tube obviously extends through a lot of interchanges. Two of those interchanges were already in the works in our work program. We had the Sand Lake Road interchange improvement, as well as the Daryl Carter project improvement. So as a result, we have modified the scopes of these projects to be able to include the tube and build the tube, deliver the project. So the first project is going to be the Sand Lake Road interchange and is going to include a portion of the tube that goes within the project limits of Sand Lake Road. And that's shown here with the letter A. This is proposed to be a design build project in fiscal year 2022. And then we have the Daryl Carter Parkway interchange, which will also include a portion of the tube. This is shown here with the letter B, and it's a design bid build project in fiscal year 2022. And then finally, the last portion of the tube is also going to go with some improvements that we identified for the 535 interchange in I-4. And this is going to go in fiscal year 2023 as a design build project. I did want to point out that the tube will not be open until all of these sections are completed to traffic. So now I'm going to go and talk a little bit more about each one of those projects. So the first one being the Sand Lake Road interchange with the tube that goes within the project limits. And like I mentioned earlier, this project, the Sand Lake Road improvement, was already in the works, and we are not changing what we were proposing. So we're converting the interchange to a diverging diamond interchange. We're eliminating the left turn westbound Sand Lake to southbound Turkey Lake Road. And that movement is going to be now completed by the loop ramp that's shown in the screen with the yellow arrow, and is going to be able to relieve some of the congestion at that intersection. Also, travelers that are coming from westbound I-4 that want to exit to Turkey Lake, they will merge with the loop ramp traffic, and they will exit to Turkey Lake Road at a signalized intersection that's just south of the Whole Foods Plaza. We will also include pedestrian and bicycle protective ways for pedestrian and bicyclists. We will also include enhanced aesthetics as well as landscaping. And this is the typical, so the I-4 at Sand Lake Road interchange, through this area, through the Sand Lake interchange, we're going to build the ultimate typical of the I-4 beyond the ultimate. So we're going to include 2 express lanes, and specifically the ones in the westbound direction. So it's going to connect to the ones that are being built by I-4 Ultimate. And then somewhere just south or west of Sand Lake, we're going to merge from 2 express lanes into 1 express lane, or the tube. So this is what is going to merge to at some point west of Sand Lake Road. Some of the key dates of our design build procurement schedule include the advertisement of this project, which is scheduled for next Monday, October of 2021. Then we're gonna go our shortlisting in December of 2021, and then final selection of the design build team in June of 2022. Now I'm gonna talk about the Daryl Carter Interchange Drainage Improvement Project. So as I mentioned earlier, the tube goes through, it's about 8 miles long, and it goes through a lot of interchanges. We were already working in the Daryl Carter interchange improvement, and we wanted to include, because we wanted to avoid contractors working on top of each other. So we needed to modify the schedule for Daryl Carter. But what we did is we are going to advance, we're gonna keep the letting of January 2022 to include drainage improvements to the Big Sand Lake outfall, as we realize that this is a very important project to the community as well as Orange County. And so we're not gonna move that letting that was already in the works. And then this is the Daryl Carter at I-4 interchange improvement. Again, this was already in the works, so the scope hasn't changed with the exception of adding that tube within the project limits. Sorry. So some of the improvements include converting the existing overpass into an interchange, a diverging diamond interchange. We're going to be keeping the existing bridges, that they don't need to be widened, and we're gonna modify it to be a diverging diamond interchange. We are going to be building 3 out of the 4 ramps. The 4th ramp, being the I-4 westbound on-ramp, will be built as a separate project, as this ramp will connect to a collector distributor system. So that's not gonna be part of this project. We will also include pedestrian and bicycle facilities with this project. This is just a typical section that it connects to the tube, so it's consistent throughout the limits of the tube, or the tube limits. Some of the key dates for this design bid build procurement schedule include production in March of next year, 2022. We're going to advertise it for construction in May of 2022, and then final selection in June of next year. And then finally, this is the last portion of the tube that also includes improvements to the State Route 535 interchange at I-4. So we plan to come back at a later day to go into more details about this interchange and continue our coordination with MetroPlan. But on a quick summary, the interchange include improving the interchange at State Route 535 with adding displaced left turns. We're also proposed to do a grade separated intersection at State Route 535 and Vineland Road. We also call this an echelon intersection, where we utilize these types of intersections when the two streets are heavily trafficked. So there's a lot of traffic in both streets. So we separate one side of the street. I don't know if you can see here on the screen, we're proposing to elevate the southbound leg of State Route 535, and the northbound leg is going to stay at grade. We're also going to include pedestrian and bicycle facility upgrades. And then this will build the last portion of the tube, and its typical section is consistent with the previous typicals. And then before I open it to questions, I just wanted to, I know that there's an item in the agenda later on to vote for an amendment to a tip and stip, and it is because of the tube. And I hope that this presentation was informative and clearly explained the need and the importance of the tube. As I mentioned, is going to provide that traffic that's projected to continue to want to go west, an opportunity for to continue doing so and avoid those interchanges in between. The tube will also improve safety and operations at the I-4 ultimate endpoint of the express lanes in the westbound direction, and then will better accommodate future population increases as well as support our economic growth. So with that, I would like to open it to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Chacon. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Atkins or Ms. Chacon? I recognize those participating virtually first. Ms. Goldfarb, do we have any?
No, there are no raised hands on the attendee side, virtual side.
Thank you. Now those in the room, do I have any questions for Mr. Chacon? Mr. Hoffman? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. King. Go ahead.
Thank you. Curious how long the construction is supposed to last, since the tube won't open to toll service until it's complete?
Yeah, so we thought about that. And even though some of the lettings you saw that are staggered, we expect that about 3 years. So the first letting is going to be in June of 2022. So probably fiscal year 2025 to 2026 fiscal year is when it will be completed.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that is the eastbound toll lanes are being constructed as part of the Sand Lake improvements. That entire ultimate section is being constructed.
Correct.
Is that going to open eastbound as soon as that segment is complete?
The eastbound, where you enter the express lanes in the eastbound direction, is going to be where I-4 Ultimate is going to build that ingress point. We are going to build the pavement, but we're not going to open it to traffic. So there's going to be, we're not going to have the friction cores and the striping and all of that, but we're building as much as we can. And then for future projects, we don't have to do too much rework.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Chacon?
I had some questions.
Yeah, Ms. Donnie, you're recognized.
Oh, are you?
Hi,
How are you? Nice to see you. So with the stimulus money that you're getting, will that be able to cover all of these projects that you were talking about, this tube and the Seminole County projects, or are you looking for additional monies in future years to come out of like CIS dollars? Or?
So when it comes to the funding, it's a little intricate, but let me go back to the slide. What it's being funded through stimulus only, because we already had Sand Lake Road fully funded and Daryl Carter fully funded.
Okay.
So what the stimulus funds are covering is the tube, as well as the improvements in Seminole County. There was the 528 ramp that I mentioned earlier too. and then the 535 interchange improvements. So it's basically the slide before this presentation, if I could get to it. Yeah, I think we're gonna, yeah, it's before this presentation. I think I have to exit, but it's the tube only, 528 ramp, 535 interchange improvements, and then the improvements in Seminole County.
And so you think that the stimulus dollars will, that's all you need, or will you need future funding as well to advance all these projects?
No, that is what we need.
Okay, perfect. And then I had a couple questions for DOT that I emailed, but I just wanted to make sure that, Mr. Chairman, that the rest of the TAC
Sure.
knew. So that was one of my questions. And then the other question, I think Mr. Atkins really answered in his preamble, was that by advancing these projects with the federal stimulus dollars, does that provide an opportunity to move some of the Osceola County projects forward at a quicker rate? Because none of these dollars are going into Osceola, the stimulus dollars. And Mr. Atkins said that by being able to advance some of these projects, that they, other items in their work program may be able to be moved up, I think is, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, ma'am. And I think we got you some answers back on those
Yes.
questions.
Appreciate it.
And yes, absolutely. And I think one of the ones was your Neptune Road project
Right.
that we're looking to fund. So
Yes,
that's our hope, that we're able to kind of use some of these funds that we had already programmed to cause that ripple effect.
great. Yes, thank you so much for that. And then the last question I had for DOT in my email was, we talk a lot about equity analysis on this committee. I know Mr. Stasi talks a lot about that. And so my question was, does this go into that equity analysis, these federal stimulus dollars? Because, they're new monies, but because they're stimulus dollars, DOT said, no, they don't necessarily go into the consideration, but they are looking, as Mr. Atkins said, because Osceola did not get any of these dollars, but looking for further opportunities to fund our number one project, which is Neptune Road. So I just wanted to make sure everybody on the committee knew of my comments, and thank you, DOT, for responding.
Thank you, Mr. Laura. Very good points, and thank you for the responses from FDOT. I have a couple of quick questions, and I'll make it brief. I'm assuming that the ultimate goal for this tube project would be to eliminate weaving and perhaps ultimately improve the level of service for those areas. Am I right?
Right, it's gonna provide, especially those vehicles traveling the express lanes, that reliable continuous flow in the express lanes to the termination point.
Okay.
And it's gonna move some vehicles from the general use lanes by providing this express lane.
Okay. So have we looked at numbers that would be using those express lane? Obviously, we have, compared to the general motorist using the entire section of that I-4. In other words, how many people are you going to expect to have using the tube versus the overall number of motorists using that segment?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but through the analysis, we recognize that about half of the people in the express lanes for I-4 Ultimate want to continue going west. And the other half, we want to get off at where the I-4 Ultimate express lanes end and utilize those interchanges, that being Sand Lake 528, Central Florida, and so on.
Right, but does that mean that the other half that wants to continue going on, does that mean they're automatically going to use a tube? I mean, there may or may not, because it costs money to do that, right?
Right. Well, based on our traffic projections, that's what we expect. They want to continue and bypass those interchanges. So this is why, from a traffic point of view, how the tube is supported.
Okay, so to be the devil's advocate, what happens if you don't get enough use in those two lanes of express travel? And ultimately you have lost two travel lanes in essence, or getting inefficient use of that. How does that affect the rest of the travel?
Well, it is through, so after the I-4 Ultimate ends, there's just one toll site in that area that will get you west of 535. So it might be appealing to, if there's congestion in the general use lanes, I think, it's a reliable service that's gonna be there for you, and it's just an extra toll site that we're proposing with the tube.
Great. I guess what I'm getting at some point, would you consider converting those lanes into travel lanes if it didn't work?
Well, this tube is part of our ultimate vision of the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate. We have been, as part of our analysis, we've been looking, how do we add that additional capacity that we need?
Mhm.
So we've asked ourselves, what if we add just general use lanes, free lanes? What if we add HOV lanes? What if we add truck lanes? Is that gonna serve the demand that's being projected? And through our analysis, the best mechanism to address that future demand, it will be the express lanes.
Again, I promise this will be the last question. Have you looked at truck use is actually using those lanes, and how does that affect it?
I believe that we don't allow trucks in the express lanes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I have a question.
You recognize?
Well, I have two things. The first is a little bit more of a comment. I just wanted to say that when we're talking about capacity, it seems very focused on vehicle throughput. And I'm curious, and I'd be interested to hear in the future, the relationship we see with the express lanes and high occupancy vehicles like carpool, vanpool, and regional transit. But my real question is, with the interchanges as part of this package, you mentioned the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and just based on the concepts on the screen, I have some questions and concerns on those. So at what point, moving forward with these projects, is the public involved in those? And so what does that process look like?
So for specifically for Sand Lake and Daryl Carter, because these projects were already in our work program and we were in full design speed, we did have a public meeting. There was a public hearing for the PD&E study that was done back in, I think, 2016, I think. Don't quote me, I don't remember the exact date. And the improvements being proposed as part of the design are consistent with the PD&E. We did also have another public meeting for Sand Lake and Daryl, I believe back in 2019. And we're proposing to have another public meeting next year for community outreach.
Thank you.
All right, for the sake of time, we will proceed to the next presentation, which also will be
Mr.
by
Chair.
Ms.
I'm sorry, would you call for, can I be recognized? I have some more
Yes, please
questions.
make it fast. Thank you.
Okay. I'm curious with the new cross sections that are being proposed with the tube incorporated in them, how, I'm a visual learner, so I'd like to see like the old cross section with this kind of laid in front of it, but in the interest of time, can you clarify how the future cross section would be affected by this interim improvement being incorporated now?
Yeah, and that's a great question because we've been, as I mentioned, we've been analyzing what options we have. We realized that what came out of that PD&E study, it's the mega projects, the billion-dollar projects and we have needs that we need to address now. So at the department, we've been analyzing what options we have. And some of those include that buffer separation that will reduce the footprint, being that we haven't acquired all the right of way compared to the I-4 Ultimate one, and also the cost. So this proposed typical is in line with what our studies are being done, what we're envisioning for the future I-4 Beyond the Ultimate.
Okay, thank you. Just a few follow-up questions to that. This pavement will not go into the area that's currently reserved for the right-of-way for the connections to the west. For the multimodal connections that are incorporated. The last presentation we saw on the Beyond the Ultimate changes in July included the possibility of that right-of-way reservation going away. Would this tube express lane enter into that area?
So the tube we're proposing to widen to the inside median of I-4. We are, like I mentioned, we're doing analysis and evaluating what alternatives we have. And even with our future vision, which will be just widening to the median, there will be room on the east side of I-4 there's still room in a right of way for rail, if that's what you're getting at. And even there might be pinch points that we have identified that we can elevate the collector distributor system road if needed to open the room and provide that continuous room on the east side of I-4.
That seems like a very big change. It's not just me getting at that, the whole PD&E, really drove that interest remaining in the center lane. So I just have some concerns. It's hard to really identify them without seeing kind of these changes before we're approving funding them. My other question is the ability to do a tube heading eastbound. Is there a possibility to incorporate that into this project, especially if we would be doing away with the ability to have the rail in the middle? Could we incorporate in these projects a tube eastbound?
So eventually that's where we want to go. We want to continue our analysis. From what we can tell right now, the traffic will support 2 express lanes in each direction in the future. What this project was trying to address is that future bottleneck, especially in the westbound, because that's where you're gonna have traffic from the express lanes that is going to merge with the general use lanes. So this is what we're trying to achieve. Yes, there will be need in the future to continue to in the east. I can tell you that in the eastbound, where the I-4 Ultimate ends in Seminole County and Stereo 434, we also projected a future bottleneck, but we were able to already advance a project that's actually in the final stages of construction to add an aux lane to address the same concern that we had here on the south.
All right. Great discussion. Please forgive me for the sake of time, Ms. Strick. Well, if you could be kind enough to provide your contact information for Ms. Smith, and this way all the members of the committee will have access to that for further discussion if you'd like. Thank you. Our next presentation and the final one is on the I-4. We did that. We don't have any more presentations. My apology. We will now hear public comments on our action items. Do we have people who want to speak to any of these items? If so, please use the raise hand function found at the bottom of your screen, or by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept that prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record and keep your comments to a maximum of 2 minutes or less. Are there any public comments at this time?
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
We did not receive any.
All right, thank you both. We will now go to our action items. We have 5 action items today to keep things running smoothly. I will ask for comments first from the virtual attendees, then the members in the room will be making the motions and the comments as well. The first action item will be approval of the August 27th Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes. This is in tab 1 of your agenda package. And I'm asking for a motion to approve the minutes from August 27 minutes.
Chairman, I have a question. I sent a request for a modification of the minutes, and I just wasn't sure if this was what.
Yes,
I
there
didn't have
is
time to
a
scroll through.
revised, thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Strick. There's a revised version of the minutes with the added comments from Ms. Erin Strick. It was emailed to you earlier this week, and the request is to approve the minutes with the added comments. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as revised?
Motion to approve the minutes as revised.
Please state your name.
Joshua DeVries.
Okay, Ms. DeFries, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay,
Erin
Ms.
Strick.
Strick,
St. Cloud.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please unmute your microphones. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. The second item would be the amendment to the 2045 MTP found in tab 2 of your agenda package. And this will be presented by Mr. Nick Leb from Metro Plan Orlando. Mr. Leb, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm here to present an MTP amendment to help accommodate the changes that the department just presented right now on I-4. This amendment is a little unorthodox. Usually as I come and present an amendment, we are actually changing a table within our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This would be table 6 for the state strategic intermodal system. But for this plan itself, since we adopted the SIS plan in our MTP by reference, since it is the purview of the Department of Transportation and actually developed up in Tallahassee, they are updating their SIS plan right now. So you have a letter in your packet which demonstrates that those projects that were just presented to you are consistent with the SIS plan and meet planning consistency. So what we're asking for is an adoption or amending our plan to include this letter showing that it is consistent so the plans can go forward and the department can meet their procurement schedule. So that's what I'm asking for now, to amend our MTP to be in support of these projects on state strategic intermodal system. And we'll come back to you in the future with modifications to that table 6 once the department has completed those tables. And with that, I will.
Thank you. Do I have a
Any
motion to
questions?
approve this amendment? Please don't forget to raise your hand and unmute yourself when you make that amendment and state your name. You make that.
Mr.
Motion.
Chairman, can we ask questions?
Oh, you have a discussion?
Yeah, I don't know if we need to.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So because we don't have a copy of the table, just the items that are being added, could you just run through those really quickly?
So we are adding Sand Lake Road. Well, actually, they are already added to the SIS table. Problem is our table 6 currently does not reference these projects. So what we're doing is the letter will add Sand Lake Road interchange project and also the express lanes going all the way down past 536. So that way it's consistent with the work that the department's doing. Daryl Carter is already included in our table, but the Sand Lake Road project and the tube itself was not. Though Beyond the Ultimate is in there as a need. It just wasn't identified as cost feasible.
Okay, I just, I'll make a comment that given the information that I was recently provided about the lack of ability to maintain the rail corridor in the middle or having seen a cross section that would accommodate that in some other way, I just don't believe that the tube project maintains what the PD&E spoke about doing, and I cannot support that. And I also cannot support it if if it cannot be maintained in both directions. So I would ask the department to come back to this committee and talk about what the future funding for an eastbound tube lane would be. And if we were to encroach into that center area where the rail is planned in the PD&E, if we can consider whether or not we would do that for both directions of express lanes.
Okay, do I have a motion to?
Well, I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
So go ahead.
I guess my question is, why are we doing this now? You know, you're saying that the SIS plan is already, we adopt that by reference. You're saying all this motion is to adopt this letter. Why don't we just wait until the SIS is updated and then adopt that so we actually have the tables? And why do we need to do the letter at this point?
We need to do the letter at this point, and Keith will be presenting some tip amendments that also include those same interchanges to meet their procurement schedule. Though the tip amendment does not include the stimulus money that was just discussed, it's actually SIS dollars. We needed to amend our plan so that the tip amendment can go forward and then DOT can maintain their schedules while we come back later for the stimulus. Because we're not seeing tip amendment now for the stimulus. This was a preview, but this is to make sure that they can maintain that procurement schedule for accepting of the SIS dollars.
Any others? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
A motion to approve the amendment as presented. Brett Blackadoor.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Hazel All-Star.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? We'll start with the virtual, if we have any virtually. If
No,
not,
there
we'll-
are no raised hands on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Cassie. Do we have any in the room that have any additional discussion?
I have a request for an amendment to the motion, and that it would be that the express lane going eastbound be incorporated into this request. I understand that the stimulus dollars are tight, but that I haven't heard anything about how much those would cost and how much the difference would be. But I can support it if we would consider the eastbound tolling as well.
Okay, so Ms. Strick, would you like to amend the motion on the floor right now?
I'm asking if any, I would,
Okay,
and
can
I'm
you- can
asking
you
if
state the
anyone would
motion
like
then?
to
Can you
second.
make that motion?
So
As-
I will, I'm requesting to amend the motion to include the eastbound express lanes and ask that DOT come back with some detail on where the rail would be if that were, when we move to fund that, where the rail will be in the future.
Okay, if we're okay with that, I'd like a second again. Ms. Asar.
Second.
that. Okay, can you state your name, please?
Laura Hardwick.
So we have a motion, and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
The
Mr.
amendment
Chairman,
has to be voted on separately.
yeah, I
Okay.
just,
The amendment needs to be voted on separately
Oh.
in the actual motion.
Okay,
and Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure and ask Mr. Leff if that is okay with how we have this set for the next votes, and I just want to see what that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I was actually going to say, so our letter right now only states consistency with the projects that are going forward with the tip right now. So having that motion, we don't have anything that supports an amendment for both directions. So the only thing on the table right now is supporting an amendment for the Sand Lake Road interchange and the westbound tube for consistency with our MTP.
Can you ask DOT to reply to how this would not be consistent with the SIS plan if the westbound were?
The department like to.
Hi, my name is Kelly Smith. I'm the PLEMO administrator for the district. For the SIS plan for the cost feasible, and Nick and I can kind of tag team on this, but it's for what is actually programmed. That's what we're asking to amend for what has been programmed through the stimulus money. For the eastbound tube that you're referencing, there's not been any money identified for that. As Catalina was saying, it's an interim improvement, and so we need to start somewhere. And so as we continue to kind of work through the beyond the ultimate, those are things that we are going to be working with Metro Plan and our partners to see how we continue to move those projects forward.
I'm just very concerned about mobilizing construction within segments of a corridor and then asking to come back to do something later. It seems short-sighted.
And for this, we're looking for the consistency in our MTP to move forward with what is being funded. That can be revisited if there are additional funds to expand and do the eastbound, and we can bring that back to the committee and board.
Yeah, just my concern, and I'm sure, you asked us to express our opinion, and I thank you guys for your time and listening. But for us to be considering what we would support at the time when the funding has already been allocated, it just seems a little bit backwards. And this committee should be afforded more time to consider the massive changes that are happening to the beyond the ultimate section that are going to affect the cross section that was identified in the PD&E. Thank you all for listening.
What was it? I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. That's, I guess the amendment on the floor for, I'm just stating it's not consistent with our letter, so I don't know how that amendment would go.
We'll take a vote.
Just a quick question.
Have to vote on the amendment to see if it can be added to the motion before you vote on the motion. So you have to vote on the amendment separately.
So I will just ask one more question. Can we amend the MTP to include the eastbound tube lane if we are not funding it now?
Yes, we could. And we can discuss that when we have the larger amendment with the SIS plan, but right now our letter only demonstrates that it is consistent. The action that we're going to be taking is consistent with their current SIS plan. So when we adopt and we come back to you and adopt the full SIS plan as it is, that's when that discussion could happen as to what is in that SIS plan that we're adopting as reference into our plan.
I guess we already have an adopted SIS plan, and this is an amendment, in my opinion, to the adopted SIS plan. And we have a letter that says, I mean, is there any way to amend the letter to say that the SIS plan could afford this, whether or not it's funded today?
Well, actually, this is an amendment demonstrating that the SIS plan is consistent with your next TIP amendment, because our current plan table is not, because we adopt it by reference, and that table is developed in Tallahassee. We have this letter for us demonstrating that the plan, the TIP amendments that you're going to see are consistent with the overall SIS cost feasible plan. So that way it can move forward with the TIP and that pre-work that needs to be done. We will come back to you with the full MTP amendment, adopting by reference those new tables that Tallahassee is working on right now. And that's when you'll have the opportunity to see those in the full cost feasible plan.
Well, if it's not feasible to adopt that now as a part of this motion supporting the next action item, the funded projects, I would just ask that the state look at amending their tables in the future and come back to us with tables that include symmetry in our cross sections.
And we'll work with the department on that amendment before it comes forward to the committees and board.
With that said, I'll just withdraw my motion to amend the tables because it sounds like that is not feasible today, but you can understand our frustration. I think I sent several questions in advance of this meeting and did not receive a response, and this is very frustrating.
Wait for vote first. Unmute your microphones virtually, and people in the room do that as well. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Opposed?
One opposition. Since we have an opposition, we would have to do a roll call, a vote. Roll call. Ms. Smith, if you could do that, please.
Albert Dontuano,
Nay.
Blackadar,
Yes.
Cash,
Yes.
Castro,
Yes.
Clem, Cornelison,
Yes, aye.
DeVries,
Yes.
El Hassar,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Gold,
Aye.
Hardwick,
Aye.
Hawthorne,
Aye.
Hit,
Yes.
Dredge,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Kessel,
Yes.
King, Krug,
Yes.
Moskowitz,
Yes.
Muhison,
Yes.
Maherky,
Yes.
Allure,
Yes.
William,
Yes.
Radzai, Ramos,
Yes.
Nastasi, Schmidt, Sonorens, Stirk,
Nay.
Tracy,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Williams. Mr. Chair, we had 2 no votes. So the motion carries.
All right, motion carries, motion passes. Thank you for the discussion. Our next action item is the FDOT amendment to FY 2021-22, 25-26 TIP found in your tab 3. And this amendment will be presented by Mr. Keith Gasky. Mr. Gasky.
Okay, well, as Nick mentioned, this follows up on the MTP amendment. The TIP is also being amended to include the I-4 Sand Lake interchange and express lane from State Road 528 to Kirkman Road, and the express lane from Central Florida Parkway to 528. Also, the amendment includes the advanced drainage work for the I-4 Daryl Carter Parkway interchange project. And I think Nick also mentioned that this amendment is needed for FDOT to meet their procurement schedules for these projects. And again, you all have the information on this in tab 3. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
All right, you heard the amendment. Do I have any a motion to approve the amendment? Okay.
Motion to approve, O'Laurie.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Blackadoor.
Motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
The items that are on this TIP amendment are just the first 3 projects that were in Orange County, but I don't see the items that are in Seminole County that were identified in the last presentation as funded. Were those projects already funded in the TIP? And they're just switching the money for this new funding
No,
source?
well, there'll be a future amendment coming up, most likely at the next meeting that should include those projects.
Okay. I thought some of the feedback that I received in advance of this meeting was that the need to approve these projects in the TIP today was because the federal stimulus dollars timing required that. And it's surprising to me that it wouldn't require it for the Seminole County projects.
Apologize for the confusion. So they are only SIS dollars that you're seeing in this TIP amendment, current SIS dollars, not the federal stimulus. You will see the federal stimulus coming back to this committee and board in the next cycle. We wanted to do the preview, but this amendment is needed to meet that procurement schedule. So then when you adopt next TIP or consider the next TIP amendment, it can maintain on schedule as Catalina presented to meet that 22 and 23 of letting dates. So this is kind of a pre-amendment for some of those projects because they need to meet procurement schedules.
And this is just an increase in the funding to add the tube through those already funded interchange projects?
It basically the pre-work for some engineering and some drainage work as Catalina presented to accommodate then the stimulus funds for construction in 22 and 23.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussions from the online folks? Ms. Gofrapp?
No, there are no raised hands on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
All right. With that, this is a voice vote. All committee members online, please unmute your microphones. Those in the room, please just speak out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. The next action item is the appointment of officer selection for subcommittee. I'm looking for a subcommittee to help in selecting the next officers. That will be the chair and the vice chair for next year's. And we would like to get a volunteer from each county and one from the city, if you would, please. So feel free to volunteer at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I'll volunteer for Seminole County. Mary Osgood.
Thank you, Mary. Ms. Askowitz, you got that?
Mr. Chair, I'll volunteer for Osceola County.
Great. Ms. Allure. One more for Orange. Are you allowed to do that? Can he hear you? All right. So we have Mr. Nastasi from Orange County. We need one more volunteer from the city. You're on it?
No.
Oh. So we're going to volunteer it. Anyone?
What about from the planning council?
Yes.
I was going to say, I will volunteer from Regional Planning Council, Charles Abatentuano.
Okay. And can you speak up with your name, please?
Charles Abatentuano.
Okay. Charles Abatentuano. So we have those 4. Now I would like to get a vote to confirm those committee members. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the members of this committee at this point?
I'll make
Motion
a
to approve.
Hawthorne.
Okay, Mr. Hawthorne with a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Josh DeBreeze.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'll first ask for participation from the online folks. Any discussion?
There are
No,
no
those in
raised
the room?
hands on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. In the room, do we have any discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next action item is approval of the proposed 2022 board committee meeting schedule. This is our schedule for next year, and Mr. Keith Gasky will be presenting the information to you. Mr. Gasky?
Okay, well, this is pretty straightforward. I think really the only thing we need to discuss is the date of the May meeting. Right now, it's scheduled for May 27th, and of course, that's Memorial Day weekend. So we just wanted to see if there was any consensus as to whether you all want to keep that date as is, or if you want to move it up to May 20th, or how you wanted to handle that. So open it up for discussion and see if anyone wants to make any changes to that.
Any changes that you'd like to offer to the proposed May date?
What did the TSMO committee do before? Our meeting?
I think they just left it kind of as is for now,
Okay,
with the option to change it later if they want
okay.
to.
We should probably be consistent with that.
Mr. Chairman, and I also say this historically has come up before, and we've always voted to keep it on the
Okay.
Friday before Memorial Day.
It's your choice. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting schedule as is?
Motion, Kane.
Kane made a motion. Do I have a second, please?
A second, Moskowitz.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Online or in the room?
There are no raised hands on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't see any in the room. This is a voice vote. All committee members, please unmute your microphones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, this motion passes. Thank you for your help. Next, there is no technical advisory committee, only presentations today. They're all, I want to bring your attention to several items under the general information at tab 3 in your agenda package. Take a look at that. Our next TAC meeting will be held on December 3rd and will also be a hybrid meeting. Please remember that RSVPs are very important because we need to take actions at these meetings. So we need that quorum. The next MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be on November 10th, and this meeting will be an in-person meeting. At this time, do I have any committee members who want to make final comments? I'll recognize those participating online first, as usual. Please use the raise hand function if you have any comments.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Thank you, Kathy. For those in the room, please indicate by turning the raise hand function on and unmuting your microphone. Do we have any comments from folks in the room?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Ms. Stark for sharing, expressing her questions and concerns and sharing that with the group. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. We come to the final public comments point. If any members of the public wish to comment by joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function. We'll send you a prompt to unmute yourself. Please do so. State your name and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment? Ms. Goldfrapp.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Okay, thanks again. Do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a public comment?
We have not received any.
Okay, great. At this time, I want to thank you for your tentativeness and discussion. We had a great discussion today. Have a great weekend. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.